So let's turn to the definition of burglary and parse it out. We learn from general principles that every crime, except statutory rape, has both an actus reus and a mens rea for the crime. So let's look at this definition to see what the actus reus is and see what the mens rea is. The actus reus for burglary at common law was the breaking and entering of the dwelling house at night. We need both of these acts to take place. We need a breaking and an entering. We need for there to be a dwelling house of another, and it has to be at night. What's the mens rea for the crime of burglary? The mens rea here is that the breaking and entering must be accompanied concurrently with an intent to commit a different crime inside the house. So I have to have both the action, that's the breaking and entering, and accompanying that breaking and entering has to be the specific intent to commit a felony inside the home. An important item to note is that the crime of burglary is complete the moment the defendant enters the home with the felonious intent. I want you to freeze that frame or pause the movie when you see that. When you see that window pushed up and the defendant enter, or the door opened and the defendant entered, as long as there's the concurrent mental state, that crime of burglary is complete. And the crime of burglary never merges with any crime committed inside the home. For example, let's suppose the defendant breaks into a home to commit a theft inside that home. So we know that's the defendant's intent. When defendant gets inside the house, defendant actually steals something. Now, defendant would face two separate charges. There's a count for burglary and a count for the theft. These are two separate counts, and they actually will have two separate sentences that attach to those convictions. The charges never merge. Burglary stands as a separate crime from anything that takes place inside. Let's do another example. Let's suppose defendant breaks and enters with the intent to rape a homeowner, but gets inside the house and the homeowner's not there. Defendant would face two charges: a count for burglary, that breaking and entering with the intent to rape, and possibly attempted rape for wanting to rape the homeowner and for perhaps doing acts sufficiently close to that. There'd be a charge for the burglary and a charge for the attempted rape. And if convicted of both, there'd be two separate sentences that would attach to each one of them. Let's talk about the modern view of burglary. We've looked at the common law view, breaking and entering dwelling house of another at night with the intent to commit a felony therein. Every state has a definition of burglary. Every state has a crime called burglary. What the modern view is, they've taken the common law view, but have changed it a little bit. And when you look at the changes, you'll be able to feel the impact of urban development. No longer is burglary relegated to only nighttime of dwellings. It would make sense. We have burglaries during the daytime. We have burglaries of commercial buildings. And so modernly, every state has dropped the requirement that it has to be a dwelling. Every state has dropped the requirement that it must be at night to have a conviction for burglary. So both of those are off the table. States have in fact expanded burglary to include break-ins of all types of structures. And those structures are commercial buildings, trailers, cars, outhouses, anything where we think people could actually be. Sometimes the state will list all of the different kinds of structures. You see that in the California Penal Code that's in this chapter. Sometimes they just use the word building. That's what the Iowa Code does. Sometimes they use the word structure. But we know that modernly, no nighttime, no specific narrow view of dwelling. It's going to be any kind of structure. The third change modernly is states are divided about whether a breaking needs to happen. In some states, only an entry will suffice as long as it's accompanied by a felonious intent.